I still can't believe it happened, even now, years later. My own mother, looking me straight in the eye, told me they couldn't afford 2 tickets for my sister and me to go with her to Florida. 1 ticket, she said, was all they could manage. So, my sister got the room, the flight, the whole pampered experience, and what did I get? I got a moving truck. A huge, empty moving truck that became the symbol of everything that was wrong with my family. Was I wrong for what I did next? Tell me honestly, would you have done the same thing? Let me take you back to where all this started. I grew up in a household where my sister, Clara, was always the golden child. She was 2 years older than me, effortlessly beautiful, charming, and just easier. Or so it seemed. From the moment I could understand anything, it was clear that Clara's needs and desires took precedence. If there was 1 cookie left, it went to Clara. If there was a new outfit, it was for Clara. My parents, particularly my mom, just seemed to adore her in a way they never quite did me. I wasn't a bad kid, not by any stretch. I got good grades, I was well behaved, and I tried so hard to please them, but it never felt like enough. It was like I was constantly auditioning for a role that had already been cast. My dad was a bit more even-keeled, but even he rarely pushed back when my mom's favoritism became glaringly obvious. He'd just sigh, give me a sympathetic look, and tell me to be understanding. Understanding of what? Of being second best my entire life. This dynamic really solidified in our teenage years. Clara wanted to go to a private university out of state, a really expensive one. My parents, without a moment's hesitation, pulled out all the stops. They took out loans, dipped into their retirement savings, and even sold off a small piece of land my grandfather had left them. I, on the other hand, was encouraged to apply to the local state university, which was much more affordable. "It's a great school, honey," my mom would say, "and you can live at home and save money." It felt less like a suggestion and more like an expectation, a gentle but firm push to make the sensible choice which, coincidentally, also happened to be the cheaper choice for them. I loved learning, and I genuinely enjoyed my time at the state university, but the underlying message was always there. Clara's dreams were worth every penny, mine were to be managed within a budget. Fast forward a few years. I graduated from college, got a decent job, and started saving up for my own apartment. Clara, meanwhile, after bouncing around a bit, decided she wanted to move to Florida. She'd always loved the beach, the sun, the idea of a fresh start. My parents, of course, were thrilled. They saw it as an adventure for their beloved daughter. The plan was that my mom would fly down with Clara, help her find an apartment, get settled, and then fly back. Clara didn't have much in the way of furniture, just clothes and personal items, so the idea was that my mom would help her purchase new things once they were there. I remember overhearing a conversation about the flight tickets and apartment hunting, and a casual comment from my mom, "Oh, it's just so much easier with 2 of us to look at places." That's when the little voice in my head, the one that always tried to be optimistic, thought, maybe this time they'll ask me to come too. It would be helpful, and I'd love a trip. I mean, I was good at organizing, I had a good eye for decorating, and I was certainly strong enough to help with any heavy lifting. I waited and waited. Days turned into a week. Finally, I mustered up the courage to ask my mom directly. "Hey, Mom, so you're going to Florida with Clara soon, right? That sounds fun. Are you guys going to need an extra hand with anything?" I tried to keep my tone light, casual, like it was just a passing thought. My mom paused, looked at me, and that's when the words came out that just cut me to the core. "Oh, honey, we'd love for you to come, you know we would. But, well, We just can't afford 2 tickets for us all, and Clara really needs me there to help her get settled." She said it with a sympathetic sigh, as if it was a great tragedy that I couldn't join them, rather than a choice she was actively making. My dad, who was in the room, just nodded silently, avoiding my gaze. I remember feeling a cold dread wash over me. They couldn't afford it. My sister, the one who just had her entire expensive private university education funded, who was now being bankrolled for a new life in Florida, was deemed worthy of the expense, but I wasn't. 2 tickets, not 3. The implication was clear. I was the expendable one. I mumbled something about understanding and excused myself, my heart heavy with a familiar ache. This wasn't just about a trip to Florida. It was about every time I'd been overlooked, every time Clara had been prioritized. It was about the university, the cookies, the new clothes. It was about being told I wasn't worth the extra cost, not even for a few days of helping my own sister. That night I cried myself to sleep, feeling a resentment grow within me that was sharp and bitter. I knew then that something had to change. I couldn't keep living with this constant feeling of being less than, of being an afterthought. The next day, still reeling from the conversation, I started doing some research. I looked up moving companies, apartment prices in Florida, flight costs. I just needed to understand the scope of what they were spending on Clara, and what "can't afford" really meant. What I found just solidified my anger. They were renting a fairly spacious 2-bedroom apartment for Clara, buying her brand new furniture, and funding her living expenses for the first few months until she found a job. The flight for my mom was first class, as Clara apparently needed extra legroom for the journey, and my mom wouldn't let her travel alone in coach. I knew my parents weren't wealthy, but they weren't struggling either. They had more than enough saved up. The "can't afford" was a lie, a convenient excuse to exclude me, to once again elevate Clara. This was the situation I was in, and I had to make a choice. My mom and Clara were leaving in a week. I could swallow my feelings, pretend everything was fine, and continue to be the good, understanding daughter. Or I could finally, after all these years, stand up for myself, in a way that would make them truly see the disparity. Before I tell you what happened next, I want you to pause and comment below what you would have done in my shoes. Would you have confronted them directly? Would you have just let it go? Or would you have found your own way to make a statement? I decided that I couldn't just let it go this time. My resentment had festered for too long, but I wasn't going to yell or scream or beg for their attention. I was going to show them. I started by calling Clara, pretending to be excited for her move. "So, are you taking much with you on the plane, or buying everything new there?" I asked, playing it innocent. Clara, oblivious, launched into a detailed explanation of all the new things my parents were planning to buy her: a new bed, a sofa, kitchen appliances, everything. She even mentioned that my mom was trying to figure out how to get her old childhood dresser, a beautiful antique piece that had been passed down through generations, shipped down to her. "Mom really wants me to have it," she chirped. That dresser, by the way, was something I had always admired, and my grandmother had once told me it would be mine. Another piece of my history being redirected to Clara. That's when the idea, fully formed and deliciously vengeful, clicked into place. I didn't want a plane ticket. I wanted something else, something that would make my point undeniable. I went online and, with the money I had painstakingly saved for my apartment down payment, I booked a one-way flight to Florida, arriving the day after my mom and Clara. And then, the piece de resistance, I rented a massive 26-foot moving truck, the kind you see on highways, packed to the brim with a family's entire life. I paid for it to be picked up in my hometown and dropped off in the Florida city Clara was moving to. The cost was substantial, but I didn't care. This wasn't about money, it was about dignity. The day before my mom and Clara were due to leave, I called my mom. "Hey, Mom," I said, trying to keep my voice even, "I just wanted to let you know, since you and Dad couldn't afford a second ticket for me, I decided to arrange my own transport down to Florida to help Clara get settled. I figured it would be easier if I just drove down. I also thought, since you're buying her all new furniture anyway, it would be a shame to waste that beautiful antique dresser she wanted. So I packed it up along with some of my old things that Clara always loved, and I'm bringing them down in the moving truck. It'll save you some money on buying new stuff, and it'll be a nice surprise for Clara to have her dresser." Silence. A long, stunned silence on the other end of the line. Then my mom's voice, tight and strained. "A moving truck? What are you talking about, a moving truck?" "Oh, you know," I replied, feigning nonchalance, "the big ones. I figured if you couldn't afford an extra plane ticket, you certainly wouldn't want to pay for shipping that antique dresser, or any other large items Clara might want. This way, everything's covered. I'll be there the day after you land, ready to help Clara unpack everything I'm bringing her." I emphasized everything I'm bringing her, just enough to make my point. I could practically hear her brain scrambling. The careful narrative of "can't afford" was shattering. The idea that *I* was paying for a cross-country moving truck, filled with items for Clara*, when they supposedly couldn't afford my plane ticket, was a direct slap in the face to their fabricated excuse. The next day, my mom and Clara left for Florida, probably with a very awkward plane ride between them. I, meanwhile, methodically loaded the moving truck. I packed that antique dresser, along with a few boxes of my own belongings that I truly wanted to keep, things that had sentimental value to me and that I decided I wasn't leaving behind for them to sort through or give away. But I also added in some things Clara had always coveted from my room growing up: some old books, a vintage lamp, a set of art supplies I rarely used but that she had always admired. I even threw in a few bags of clothes I was planning to donate anyway. This wasn't just about showing them up. It was about making a clean break, taking back what was mine, and giving them the symbolic gesture of what they had chosen. I drove the massive truck across states, the engine rumbling, a tangible representation of my years of quiet resentment, finally making noise. It was liberating, albeit a little terrifying. When I arrived in Florida, pulling that enormous moving truck into the gleaming, upscale apartment complex my parents had rented for Clara, the scene was priceless. My mom, Clara, and my dad, who had flown down a few days later to supervise the setup, were standing outside, looking absolutely dumbfounded. My mom's face was a mask of disbelief and thinly veiled fury. Clara, however, initially looked confused, then intrigued. "Surprise," I said, jumping out of the truck, a wide, triumphant grin on my face. "I told you I was coming to help." My mom immediately pulled me aside. Her voice was a hushed, furious whisper. "What in God's name are you doing? A moving truck? We told you we couldn't afford it." "Exactly, Mom," I said, my voice calm but firm. "You couldn't afford a plane ticket for me, but I could afford a moving truck for Clara, to bring her all these wonderful things, including her antique dresser she wanted so much. I figured, if you were going to go all out for her, I could at least contribute to her new life, even if you couldn't quite manage to include me in the original plan." The sarcasm hung heavy in the air. My dad, bless his heart, actually looked a little ashamed. Clara, meanwhile, walked around the truck, her eyes widening as she saw the familiar shape of the dresser. "My dresser? Oh my gosh, you brought my dresser, and that lamp. I can't believe you did this." She ran up and hugged me, completely missing the loaded tension between me and our mother. For a moment it felt good, like a tiny victory. We spent the next few days unpacking. I helped Clara arrange her new apartment, and the things I brought, especially the dresser, became focal points. My mom hovered, trying to act normal, but the air was thick with unspoken words. The "can't afford 2 tickets," a lie, had been exposed in the most undeniable way possible. The cost of that moving truck, my independent journey, and the implicit statement it made about my value versus Clara's, was something they couldn't ignore. I stayed for a week, helping Clara get truly settled. But during that time, my relationship with my parents shifted irrevocably. The favoritism, once a subtle undercurrent, had been brought to the surface and splashed across the Sunshine State. I realized I couldn't keep chasing their approval, couldn't keep expecting them to treat me equally when they clearly never would. It was a painful realization, but also a liberating one. I had made my point, loud and clear. When it was time for me to leave, I didn't ask for a ride to the airport. I booked my own return flight, using the rest of the money I had originally saved for my down payment. I just said my goodbyes, told Clara I loved her and to keep in touch, and left. My mom tried to make some conciliatory noises, talking about how much she appreciated my help, but the words felt hollow. I just nodded, said it was no problem, and walked away. The aftermath wasn't dramatic in the way you see in movies, no shouting matches or grand apologies. Instead, it was a quiet recalibration of my life. I found a new apartment, a small but comfortable place that was entirely mine, a testament to my own hard work and independence. I focused on my career, on my friendships, on building a life where I felt valued and respected. My relationship with my parents became more distant, cordial, but no longer intimate. Clara and I maintained a relationship, though it was never quite the same. She still struggled to fully grasp the depth of the favoritism, often saying things like, "But Mom and Dad love us both." And I would just smile sadly and change the subject. The moving truck became a powerful symbol for me. It wasn't just about the physical act of moving. It was about moving on from a lifetime of being overlooked. It was about taking control of my own narrative and declaring my worth. It cost me a significant chunk of my savings, but it gained me something invaluable, my self-respect. It was the most expensive plane ticket I never bought, and yet it was worth every single penny. So that's my story. My mom said they couldn't afford 2 tickets. My sister got the room, the flight, and all the new furniture. And I got a moving truck. I've never regretted it. I've never asked them for anything significant since, and they've never offered. It's a strange kind of peace, a quiet understanding of where I stand. Like this video, if you were on my side, if you've ever felt like you were overlooked or underestimated. Subscribe for more stories like this, where people finally stand up for themselves. And please, share your final thoughts on this whole mess in the comments section below. I'll see you all in the next story.